righty. Clock on the pew says 9:01. And AT&T clock says it's 9:02. So we'll go ahead and get ready to get started this morning. As we get going, prayer list. Anybody, any updates, anything we need to know about? I haven't looked at the bulletin, so I don't know if we got any updates there. Okay. All right, so Freddie's home and doing better. Okay. Kaylee is back in England. Made her a safe trip back this week. Anything else? Trying to think if there's any updates I know of anybody. Everybody's quiet. Everybody's pondering the last day of the year. That's what it is. We're all reminiscing. All right, if nobody has anything else, we'll start with a prayer and get rolling into class this morning. Father, we come this morning thanking you for a day, a beautiful morning which we have to come together, to worship you, to study from your word, Father, to sing praises to you. Father, we come at the end of another year thanking you for the many blessings you bestowed upon us in 2023, the many great physical and spiritual blessings you've given us both. But again, Father, we thank you as always for the gift of your Son, who is given on our behalf. Father, as we're looking forward to the beginning of a new year, we ask that you would help guide us, direct us, and have us to do the things that you would want to do in this brand new year of 2024, especially here at Southside. Father, we ask that you would help us to be an even brighter light to the community and the world around us. Help us to point more people to you. Father, those who are battling illness and other difficulties, those we know about and those we do not, we ask that you would continue to be with them, be with those providing care for them, Father. Father, as always, too, we come asking for your continued forgiveness, your grace, and your mercy as we fail to do the things we should do and we fail by doing things we should not. We ask that you'd help give us strength, wisdom as we continue to press forward, walking and attempting to walk closer with you each and every day. Father, now as we prepare to begin studies here across our Southside campus this morning, we ask you would you help focus our hearts and our minds to the things from your word that we're about to look at. Help us take them and apply them to our lives so that we may grow in our knowledge of you. Father, as always, we come asking all of this in your Son's precious name. Amen. All right, we are rolling on with our 13 C's of successful Christian living. James, just grab you one off the cords there. They ought to be good. They ought to all be charged up. Before we get into this, I was just thinking, a minute ago about looking back at 2023. Anybody think 2023 went by like zip? It flew by. And what's really interesting to me, when you think back about it, it was 4 years ago, this time of the year, we were hearing things about a virus. The first we were hearing about COVID was late of 2019. You realize it's now been 4 years. That's one of those things when I look back at it, it doesn't seem. In some ways it does feel like it's been a lot longer than 4 years. In other ways it feels like that was yesterday. It's just time keeps rolling on. All right, 13 C's so far. We have talked about a life of commitment, a life of confidence, a life of constancy, a life of contentment, a life of character. We've also talked about a life of challenge, and last week we talked about a life of cheer, which is especially appropriate going into a brand new year of 2024. Anybody want to take a shot at what C may be next on the list? Any thoughts? What might be on the list? And this one is sort of actually going to work out to be a double C word, because I think the two words together apply appropriately. I don't think you can separate them. But our next C we're going to look at A life of caring. A life of caring. Now, what's another C word that you think could be connected to a life of caring? And I think they really have to be connected because I don't think one can exist without the other. While we're looking at a life of caring, to me there's a word that just has to go with that. Close? There you go. A life of compassion. To me, if you're going to be caring, you have to have compassion. A life of caring. Dr. Norman Vincent Peale wrote, to be successful is to be helpful, caring, and constructive. To make everything and everyone you touch a little bit better. Wouldn't that be a great goal for 2024? Is to make everyone that we come in contact with, that we work to make them better. Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers wrote one. I am always comforted by realizing there are still so many helpers, so many caring people in this world. You know, despite all the bad things and all the drama and the difficulties and the war and all the bad stuff that goes on, when you look around, there are still a lot of people who care. And I think we need to do more about telling the stories of those people who care, and we need to help be those people that care. Margaret Mead wrote, never believe that a few caring people can't change the world, for indeed that's all who ever have. A few caring people can make a big difference. Pablo Casals, cellist, conductor, he wrote, I feel the capacity to care is the thing which gives life its deepest significance. The capacity to care. Webster defines caring as feeling or showing concern for or kindness to others. Feeling or showing concern for or kindness to others. Would it be an accurate statement to say the world is lacking in a lot of this today? While there still are caring people around, we need to have more caring. We need to have more compassion. And I hate to say it, but when we look at the church, we need to have more caring and we need to have more compassion. We need that too. Webster defines compassion as sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. Last part of that's pretty important, with a desire to alleviate it. You can feel for somebody's situation, but if you truly are compassionate, you have a desire inside to do something to help them out. If we're caring people with compassion, when we see someone who's hungry, someone whose salvation is lost, someone who has no place to live, we have a desire to do something about it. Whether that's we can physically do something about it, or whether we can support an effort to do something about it, or whether we can pray to do something about it, we should have a desire to do something if we care. We should have a desire to alleviate others' pain. Let's turn to Matthew 22. A minute. Matthew 22. And let's go to verse 37.
Jesus spoke to them again.
Hope I don't need him to read it, though. Had that playing in the car, I've forgotten, so now when I open the Bible app up again, he just takes off. All right, Matthew 22, beginning of verse 37. And it says, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Jesus says the two commands sum up the law and the prophet. Law and the prophets. What are they? What are those commands? Love God. Love others. Love your neighbor as yourself. One is to love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and strength. Here's the kicker. As you look at the first command in that statement that Jesus makes, if you do the first, what happens with the second? Does it not just fall into place? If you love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, then loving your neighbor as yourself ought to just happen right in place. 2 is to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, what does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? Throw out some answers here. Throw out some thoughts. What does it mean to love your neighbor as you love yourself? Do for them like you would yourself. Generally, unless you're dealing with some mental health issues, are you going to mistreat yourself? Are you going to do things that harm you and your family? Do for your neighbor what you would want done for yourself, or be willing to do for your neighbor what you would do for yourself. Through history, there have been a lot of televangelists who have made statements that just leaving your head shaking. Oral Roberts was one of those. But one time he said something, I remember as a youth, I heard something he said, and I said, that's accurate. He says, I am no better than anyone else, but I am worth as much as anyone else. That's what we're looking about here, about treating others as you would treat yourself, or loving others as you love yourself. Love yourself, but love your neighbor at the same level. We are no better than anyone else, but don't short yourself because you are as important as anyone else. Because when Jesus died, he died for all. So loving your neighbor as yourself is mean love all. While we are to love ourselves, we're not to be selfish or to put our needs above others. In other words, it's not all about me, 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 me. In the 1980s, we called it the what generation? The 1980s was called the me generation, or the me decade, because it was all about what I can get, how much I can get, when I can get it. We had come out of a tough decade of the 70s, and the 80s really became a me, me, me time. But we're not to put our needs above the needs of others. A successful Christian life involves living a life of concern for others / for being unselfish. A successful Christian life involves living that life of concern. All right, let's go to 2 Corinthians 8. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. 2 Corinthians 8, and we'll start with verse 1. And it goes, and now, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. In the midst of a very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord's people. In the midst of a trial, they exhibited care and compassion for others. Because it says, and this was just not any trial, because Paul writes here, it was what kind of trial? The NIV says, very severe trial. But yet it says they had overwhelming joy. Gave as much as they were able, and then what? They gave more. And it says they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service. They cared, and they took great joy in their care and compassion. Now let's go on to Galatians chapter 4. Galatians 4, verse 13. As you know, it was because of an illness that I first preached the gospel to you, and even though my illness was a trial to you, you did not treat me with contempt or scorn. Instead, you welcomed me as if I were an angel of God, as if I were Christ Jesus himself. Where then is your blessing of me now? I can testify that if you could have done so, you would have torn out your eyes and have given them to me. Paul says at one point, you treated me, you cared and exhibited great compassion for me, and you treated me like I was Jesus himself. Treating others with great compassion and great caring. That involves putting who first? Regardless of our compassion and caring, who's always to be first? Is God. God's always first. Others come second. Others come second. And where are we on this list? Then we're to come last. With our caring and compassion, if we're walking the walk that we're supposed to be walking, God is always first, others are next, and then we come into play. Now, you know what's really cool about this is the way it all works out if everything is done appropriately. Because if your self last is with you, but you're going to be up the list on somebody else's list. That's the way it's supposed to work. We're supposed to care for others. So if I'm caring for someone else is there to help care for me. That's how it's supposed to work, is we care for each other. We have compassion for each other. One writer said, at the core of Christianity is caring for one another. By having a heart that cares, it shows that we are seeking to be like Jesus. As you read through pages in the gospel, you can see the amount of love that Jesus showed for everyone. He went on to say, no matter where Jesus went, he showed love and compassion for all of the people that he met. He met them where they were. He met them with compassion. And then if they needed to be instructed on they need to live better, he told them that. But he exhibited compassion towards the people he encountered. Who were generally the people that Jesus was most critical of? Pharisees. Those who should have known better. It was not the daily people, the people who were lost, the people who had issues that Jesus was critical of. He was critical of those who should have been caring and exhibiting compassion for them in the first place. You know, Jesus goes on and he talks to them in settings where he says, you should know. You know the law. You know the scriptures. But you exhibit not what? Love. They didn't exhibit love. They didn't exhibit compassion. They didn't exhibit caring. To be a caring or compassionate Christian, we must first be an empathetic Christian. We must have some empathy for people. Empathy is defined as the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another. I don't necessarily know that the last part is as critical as understanding, being aware of, and being sensitive to. If we're going to be caring or compassion, we have to have a little bit of empathy for the situation that people are in. And I think sometimes as Christians, we get overly critical of those who find themselves in a difficult situation because we have no empathy for where they are. Empathy versus sympathy. What's the difference? Yep. Yes. In a article in Webster's Dictionary, it noted sympathy and empathy both refer to a caring response to the emotional state of another person. But a distinction made between them is typically made. The distinction between empathy and sympathy is, while sympathy is a feeling of sincere concern for someone who's experiencing something difficult or painful, empathy involves actively sharing in the emotional experience of the other person. I can have empathy because I've been, as Tim says, I've been there. I've been through it. I can empathize because it's happened to me. What's the difference then between empathy and compassion? What's the difference between empathy and compassion? Compassion and empathy both refer to a caring response to someone else's distress. While empathy refers to an active sharing in the emotional experience of the other person, compassion adds to that emotional experience a desire to alleviate the person's distress. I can empathize with someone's situation. If they've lost a job and they're struggling making ends meet at the home, say, if I've lost a job, I can empathize with their situation. I lost it, had to deal with it. The next step is having the compassion and caring by wanting to help them out. Maybe it's to cook a meal and take to that family. Maybe if I've got $50, it's to anonymously drop a card and say, here, I know you're struggling, here's $50. Compassion is when you have that desire to try and help out. You can empathize, you can have sympathy all you want, but it's your compassion and caring that motivates you to do something about it. Characteristics of a caring Christian. What are some of the things that identify a Christian as being a caring Christian? Well, one of the great traits of the early church was their caring and compassionate spirit. It was exhibited often in the early church. Let's turn to Acts 11 real quick. Acts chapter 11. And start with verse 27. Acts 11, verse 27. It's written here that during this time some prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them, named Agabus, stood up and through the Spirit predicted a severe famine would overspread over the entire Roman world. This happened during the reign of Claudius. The disciples, as each one was able, decided to provide help for the brothers and sisters living in Judea. This they did, sending their gift to the elders by Barnabas and Saul. 5 characteristics of caring Christians as we look at this here. Caring Christians help those outside their church family. We are told and commanded to help those of the faith. But caring Christians also help those around us who are struggling. A writer said, while there are many opportunities within our local fellowship, we should not neglect the needs of others or ignore their problems. One of the things I've always long believed is that it's easier to teach someone about Jesus if you've helped them through something like their day-to-day need. If someone's having trouble putting food on their table for their kids, it's a lot easier to talk to them about the love of Jesus after you've exhibited that love by helping them get some food on the table for their kids. Trying to teach them about salvation, well, they can't figure out where their next meal's coming from, and they're hungry, and they're suffering, and they're watching their kids suffer too. It's a little bit harder. Meeting the needs of others helps us open the door, many instances, to teaching them about Jesus, and it also gives us the chance to exhibit His love by our caring and our compassion. Number 2, caring Christians reciprocate to those who have blessed them. We've all had somebody in our life that's been important to us, haven't they? Especially as it pertains to helping us with our faith. Christianity came to Antioch because of the missionary spirit of the Jerusalem church. We're all in debt to those who have helped us, taught us, and shared Christ with us. We should then be willing to give back when the opportunity arises. We should be appreciative and be willing to give back to those who have helped us. 3, caring Christians respond according to their ability. That's what we're told here in Acts, is they responded and gave according to how they were able to give. Their offering was voluntary, personal, and commensurate with their financial ability. When we care, we share. If we see someone in need and we have the capability to help them out, if we're caring, compassionate Christians, we are going to take the action to do something. Some of us have the capability to do more, others have the capability to do less. Some of us have the capability to do one thing, some of us have the capability to do another. But when we care, we share. 4, caring Christians are responsible givers. I never thought about this till I saw this 5-point thing, and I thought, this is interesting. Because notice they sent their offering by reliable messengers, and it was delivered to those that they could trust who would disperse it properly. We should not only care enough to help, but care enough to be good stewards of our gifts, to see that they are properly administered, that they meet the intended needs. As we look at the example here in Acts 11, it said they gave the help to Barnabas to make sure it got there. While we should have the desire to be caring, compassionate, we should also want to make sure that our efforts to help are being done appropriately. That's where us being stewards and recognizing that what we're doing is going to the appropriate kind of people. Make sure that you're giving it where it's going to be used. Dorian was here a couple of weeks ago. Church, through the elders, gave him some money to go back. Others of us gave him money for other specific causes because we know that he will take it back and do what he said he's going to do with it. If we're caring, compassionate, we need to make sure that we're responsible about doing it. Caring Christians follow through on good intentions. Ever heard somebody say, well, I'm going to do, or I think we ought to, but I want to, and nothing ever happens out of it? You can have wonderful intentions. You can care, but you need to follow through and execute on your caring. Note the text says the disciples determined to send relief. They made a good decision. Their intention was noble. Their purpose was worthy. All of that comes to line. It's a good thing to do. But they followed through on their decision because the text says this they also did. It doesn't say they felt compassion, they felt caring, and they discussed it and rediscussed it and discussed it and thought about it, and they decided we'd vote on it later. It says they purposed it, and this they also did. It's not enough to have good intentions. Caring Christians are doers. Intentions don't necessarily help out those who are in need. Key findings. I found this study, and there were some things there's a lot of stuff in this study from 2021 at Harvard that's not applicable to what we're looking about, but there were 3 or 4 or 5 points I thought were interesting. It was a survey done by Harvard in 2021. There were a lot of social aspects of it and political aspects on it that I'm not getting into, but there were some things that I thought we needed to really take to heart. In this study, they found that large numbers of Americans were not doing the hard work of caring. Caring is hard work. If you're going to follow through on it, especially, caring can be hard work. But in 2021, this study found that a large number of Americans just weren't doing anything about caring. This one should concern us a lot. Americans are far more likely to prioritize their own happiness over caring for others, and they're far more invested in cultivating their children's happiness than their children's caring for others. That last sentence should scare us, should concern us, and should worry us. We're raising a generation that's going to be more focused about what they want than caring about anybody around them. They're going to be more concerned about self. when we cater in to our kids, and yes, I'll admit this, to our grandkids oftentimes, and we make sure that they have everything they want, and we don't teach them that there are people around them who need help, then we're raising a generation that's not going to care for anybody else but themselves. Yeah, because we're taking away them earning it and achieving things, but we're also taking away that, hey, there are people who suffer around you. We need to make sure that our kids and their grandkids, as they're growing up, realize that everything's not a piece of cake for everyone, and that there are people around us who need help, need our caring and our compassion. The survey also said that Americans struggle to hold on to conflicting feelings and too often lack compassion from those whom they believe are misguided on important issues. In other words, what this statement says, we don't have caring and we don't have compassion for somebody who believes differently from me on a social issue or a political issue. We'll have caring and compassion for those who believe like us or stand like us, have social status like us, who believe politically like us, but we're not going to care about those who are different. Most Americans don't appear to have substantial concern for people who are different from them in terms of race, ethnicity, and religion, and many struggle to extend compassion to those they believe have made mistakes. In other words, there are a sad number of Americans and probably a sad number of Christians who look at other people and who are having difficult situations, and instead of caring and compassion says, you put yourself there. Let me give you this illustration. If we have that attitude and we look at people and we say, you've got this situation because you put yourself there, what if God had looked at humanity in its fallen state and said, I'm not going to send my son to suffer a bad death on a cross and go through all the things he's going to go through because you humans put yourself there. We need to have compassion for those who put themselves in some bad spots. Because, if we look back at all of our lives at some time or the other, we've all probably put ourselves in a bad spot too. Let's turn to Luke 6. Luke chapter 6. And starting at verse 36. Following up on that point we were just talking about, Luke 6, 36 through 38 says, be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. We're to have compassion. We're to be forgiving. We're to be understanding. We're to be caring. Really caring about others. One writer wrote, while it is not possible to know the cares and concerns of everyone on the subway or the highway of life, we do need to be sensitive to the needs of others. We need to be sensitive to the needs of others. He goes on to say, this is Ken Wallever, and he said, our immediate family, our church family, our neighbors, our one hallmark of Christian character is compassion, really caring about others, their problems, their hurts, and their concerns. We should really care. Eusebius of Caesarea was somewhere around AD 263 to 339, was an early church historian. Eusebius wrote, during a plague he wrote this. In the midst of a plague he wrote, all day long, some of them, the Christians, tended to the dying and to their burial, countless numbers with no one to care for them. Others gathered together from all parts of the city, a multitude of those withered from famine, and distributed bread to them all. In the midst of a plague, Christians led the relief effort. Eusebius goes on to state that because of their compassion in the midst of the plague, quote, their deeds were on everyone's lips and they glorified the God of the Christians. Look at his statement there. Their deeds were on everyone's lips. Everyone was talking about the good things that Christians were doing, talking about their caring and compassion, and what came about as the result of it. What's he say they did? They glorified who? God. They didn't glorify themselves. They didn't glorify others. They glorified God. When we exhibit caring and compassion, it's not about gaining glory and recognition for us. It's about gaining glory and recognition for the one who deserves it. And because of their compassion and caring, God was glorified. Things involved in caring. There are some things involved in caring. We must communicate that we care. And sometimes communicating that we care is a great example of caring. If you know someone that's going through trial and difficulties or going through loss, or maybe they lost a job or whatever, communicate that you care. Let people know that it matters to you. Let them know that they matter to you. But we need to communicate that we care. I found this slide and I thought it was cute. I'm no therapist, but I promise you this. I will listen and I will care. There are a lot of people in the world that if you'll just sit there and listen to them and let them know you care, they appreciate that as much as anything else you can do. There are a lot of people around us who just want somebody to listen. They want to know that somebody cares. Our caring must be more than just words. We need to let them know we care, but we need to do more than just say that we care. 1 John 3. As we're getting late in time here. 1 John 3. Beginning at verse 16. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. Verse 18 again. Let us love not with words or speech, but with actions and with truth. If you say you're a caring person, walk the walk. Do it with your actions. Our caring should lead us to be of service to others. We should act. We should be of service to others because we're putting others above ourselves. It doesn't show up quite as well as I thought it would. Galatians 2:10 says, they only ask us to remember the poor. And I love this line, which was the very thing I was also zealous to do. Written here, I was zealous to remember the poor. Hebrews 13:16, do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices, God is pleased. When we do and we sacrifice for the benefits of others, Hebrews writer says God likes that. He is pleased. Romans 15:1, we who are strong have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak. And then Isaiah 58:10, feed the hungry and help those in trouble. then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as noon. Is the world around us today a pretty dark place? Some days a lot darker than others. But here Isaiah writes that if we will take care of those in need, we become a light to those around us, and the darkness becomes bright. We're told to let our light shine. And how do we let our light shine? Well, Isaiah says here, our light shines by doing good for others, by caring, by being compassionate. Writer wrote, and this was an article from the Milwaukee newspaper a few years ago. He wrote, "Following Jesus should leave me more compassionate, not less." It's really that simple. As far as I can see, it's ridiculous to say I care about Jesus while not caring for the people placed in my path. We could all probably look around us in our past, maybe our present, and see people that profess to be Christian that have no caring for the people they encounter. We're to care. We're to have compassion. We are truly there to care. I like this picture because it tells you, it gives you the feeling of caring and compassion. Caring is love in action. If we want to get it down to a crux and we want to get it down to a simple statement, caring is love in action. We can have compassion, we can have sympathy, and we can have empathy, but if we're truly caring about those around us, whether it be our fellow brothers and sisters in the church or to those hurting in the world around us, we will have some kind of action. And like I said, some of us can do more than others, some of us can do different things than others, but if we're caring people, if we're caring compassionate Christians, we'll do something. Whether it's on our knees to pray, whether it's to make a financial contribution, whether it's to cook a meal, whether it's to just sit there and listen to somebody who needs support. If we're caring, we will have some action involved. Number 8 is a life of caring. And like I said, the other word, just put a slash by that, a life of caring / compassion. A successful Christian life means we are a caring people. And by the clock, we are out of time, and we will continue on with number 9 next week. Actually, next year. We'll say it'll be next week, it'll be next year. So we will continue on then.